David, welcome to the podcast.
It's wonderful to be here. Thanks for having me on.
How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Fighting off the usual colds. I obviously haven't followed your advice to not go anywhere near children this winter.
I've managed to avoid cold so far.
Okay, well, you're doing something right then.
Yeah, I'm a little bit nervous about this. I've realized this is the first time I've ever interviewed somebody.
And I am quite an intimidating person to interview, I can imagine.
I wanted to have you onto the podcast because I think you've got an interesting story to tell about not only your health and fitness, but the other things you've got going on in your life and the way that you manage all of that. A lot of the people listening will have some sort of challenges around organization, prioritizing what matters to them, fitting everything into their life. And I think you've got
Mhm.
some valuable insights that will help people with that. Before we get to all of that, can you just tell us a little bit about you, how we know each other, all of that kind of stuff?
Sure. So, how do we know each other? Blood, sweat, and tears, I suppose, in the context of our professional lives of health. We've known each other since it's about 2016, I think. Different organizations, but one common goal. We work very closely together on a lot of different things, and we have had a close relationship in that regard. And I think that probably has led to a really interesting relationship. I was reflecting on this the other day when I was thinking about how do we know each other? And you said to me, "Oh yes, I'm staying over at Lucy's parents." I said, "Oh right, okay." And the Lucy, I said to the person standing next to you, "Where are you staying?" "I'm staying at my parents'." Toby, like, "Oh wait, you're Lucy." This being the Lucy who I'd worked with previously, and I realised I knew you very well in a professional context, but less well in a personal context. But that's how we know each other. A bit about me. I'm a civil servant. I'm 41. I'm currently on a career break, which for a year, whilst I have my slow moving midlife crisis, writing a novel, which you trailed as about a talking sword, which is true, and that's the short description I've given to people. I wouldn't want people to think that just because I'm on a career break, oh right, well this guy's got all the time in the world. Why? Of course he can train three times a week and do whatever he wants. It's actually quite an interesting moment to reflect on what your priorities are and so on. And I've also worked in a number of very busy, stressful jobs. Many of them with you. Anyone who worked in health during the pandemic will know what I'm talking about. So I bring all of that context to this conversation.
Go for it.
So I also have Addison's disease, which is a chronic autoimmune condition, which affects the adrenal glands and means that I do not produce cortisol or aldosterone. Cortisol is a really important hormone which is used by your body in lots of different things. It mobilizes glycogen for the muscles. It gets you up in the morning. You might know it as a stress hormone. When you put your body under stress, be that exercise, illness, physical or mental stress, your body produces it. So not producing it is a life-threatening problem. Aldosterone regulates your sodium, and of course, sodium is really important for maintaining the appropriate amount of water in your body and so on. I have to manage my levels of those through synthetic drugs, through steroids, hydrocortisone, which means that I have to adapt my medication regime to the amount of exercise I'm doing. If I'm doing more exercise, I have to take more cortisol. If I'm ill, I have to take more cortisol. And that's a lifelong challenge I'm always going to have. I was diagnosed about five years ago, and it absolutely impacts on my health and fitness, but it's just one more thing that I kind of have to manage and just brings an extra dimension to that fitness and the stressful, busy jobs that we've talked about.
How far are you into your career break at the moment?
Well, it began in May of last year, so what, I'm 7 months or so in. Time is very much on my mind. Going back in a similar sort of time, May of this year, final date to be determined. Still haven't finished the first draft of the novel, but I'm getting there, and I'm actually fine with that because I know I will get there, and that's okay. I've learned a lot on this career break. I should also say this is my second career break. I took a career break 10 years ago, took a year off, and me and my wife traveled the world for a year, which was before we had a child. That was another incredible, very different experience in which every day was different. At the moment, every day is very much the same, but that's fine.
Yeah. So you're on a career break, but you have a varied and busy career outside of that in your work. You're writing a novel, so that's on your
Mhm.
mind. You're a father, so family life. What about other outside of those things that I'm sure take up a lot of mental headspace and energy and
Mm.
time, what about other interests, passions, hobbies?
I should also say I have a dog as well, which is a lot like having a
It's
second
another
child
thing.
sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my wife is currently ill, which can impact, and so I am occasionally caring for my wife, occasionally not. So that's another kind of thing impacting on my life. We're going through a diagnosis journey with her. But in terms of other interests, I suppose my really big passion is stories in all of its forms, stories and ideas. That kind of summarizes what I'm interested in, which is reading and writing, probably my big passions. I'm writing a novel, of course. Reading and writing are going to be my big passions. I did a master's in creative writing a few years ago, just before my daughter was born, did that part-time whilst working. And obviously now I'm taking this year off to finish writing my novel. I absolutely love reading. I love playing games, so be that board games, war games, Warhammer, video games, that kind of thing. And I'm part of a gaming group, which is a really big part of important community for me. And I think that's an important thing to have outside of work. And way too many to be involved in. Like last year, I was really into photography, and I still am, but I just don't have time to do it. So I put that one on the back burner. I'm going to return to that when I have time in a few years, or potentially never. I don't know. But constantly having to make these prioritizations. Historically, I've always salami sliced my time, and that's really unsatisfying. You just do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and I'm trying to do less of that. But I'm sure we'll get into that as well.
Yeah, I that's not really something that I struggle with. Maybe I need more interest. Maybe that's the problem. But Lucy definitely has this because she's very creative. She
Mm,
loves textiles and art and creating things, and she will go through periods of focusing intensely on one of those and getting a lot of fulfillment out of
mm,
it. And then she'll drop that for a while and go on to something else. So maybe that's similar to you with like gaming, photography, and just
mm.
having this periods where you're focusing on different things.
I think that is definitely the way to do it, but that leads to a high degree of dissatisfaction. There is a wonderful benefit in just finishing things, focusing on one thing and finishing it rather than doing lots and lots of different things. But it's so difficult to achieve that in the world that we are in, where we're bombarded by FOMO every day through doom scrolling and Instagram. And especially when you're working in a busy job, you're like, oh, I just don't want to be doing this right now. I want to be doing whatever my passion is.
Yeah, I think there's always a lot of pressure as well when you're interested in different things. There's a lot of pressure to think I have to be pursuing that thing. And then
Mm.
if there's four or five of those things on top of work and family and health and exercise and everything, you're just like overwhelmed by all of the things you could be doing. It's better, like you say, just to pick one of them, accomplish something, and then think, okay, now what else can I do?
And there was definitely a point in my life where I was really busy with work and I was trying to buy my way out of the problem. Basically, what I was doing is I was buying things that would interest me, like photography related things or game related things, which I then didn't have any time at all to do anything with it. I was just getting that dopamine hit from like, oh, I've got this new shiny thing, but then I didn't do anything with it. And after a while, I kind of had to fess up to my wife, like, I'm sorry, I've just been spending money on things that I'm just not using. But it was also a marker of the kind of stress that I was under and just not being able to deal with it. It was an attempted outlet or escape from it. And it's difficult to recognize that when you're doing those things at first.
Yeah. Well, tell us a bit about your journey with that side of things.
Yeah, and I should say that training and strength training is also, is that a hobby? Is health and fitness a hobby? I don't know. We'll call it, it's part of life. It's something that I enjoy.
I think I would say that lots of people value it as a priority because they value their health. Certainly,
Mm,
everyone listening to this is a health podcast, but that doesn't necessarily mean that people are interested in learning the why, the how, the science, all of that behind it all. And
mm.
some people see it as both a priority and an interest, like you, me, hopefully. Some people just see it as something they need to do because they value being in shape or value their health, I would say. To you, it's an interest, and I would say it's probably a hobby. To other people, even if they do take their training seriously, it might not be the same.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And as with any interest, as we discussed, there are times when I've been more into it and I'm like, right, I want to read loads around this subject. And then there have been other times when I just want to go into my gym and do my thing and then leave and think about other things. I think that actually is an important part. Recognizing which of those modes you're in is an important part of your health journey and kind of leaning into that. So my health journey, I suppose, on fitness and strength training and so on, started probably about 10 years ago, just before I went on my first career break, I think probably so about 2013. And I started going to the gym with a friend at work. And like a lot of people who first go to the gym, I didn't really know what I was doing. Did a little bit of this, a bit of the cardio, a bit of weights. But I did it for a few months, enough to notice that it made some differences to my body. And I thought, oh, this is quite good. I should carry on doing this. And then we decided to go traveling for 8 months in Asia and 4 months in Australasia. And I thought to myself, well, it's okay. I can keep on working out and maintaining my gains by taking a weighted skipping rope around the world. So I put that in my bag and took it around the world, and I used it maybe 3, 4 times on that journey. But the thing is, it actually didn't even fit in my bag. It only fit in my wife's bag. So I made my wife carry this weighted skipping rope around the world for a year. And I think that's a classic example of not recognizing the position that you're in life and modifying your health and fitness goals appropriately.
Yeah.
And I carried on in this kind of haphazard way occasionally when we came back. Then I had a child, and then around 2019, I started to get back into it a little bit more seriously. I'd been running for a while, but I decided that I wanted to put on a little bit of muscle. Unfortunately, at exactly that time, I was diagnosed with Addison's disease. As it turned out, I'd been ill for quite some time. I had lost a lot of weight, but this had also coincided with changes in my diet and doing a lot of running. So it kind of made sense why I'd lost weight at the time. At the time, I was 55 kilo on the day I was admitted into hospital.
How tall are you?
I'm 5'11".
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very light. It happened gradually though. So I wasn't I know it had happened, but it didn't seem that dramatic when it happened. Looking back on it now, it is. Anyway, went through the diagnosis, put on steroids, and one of the long-term impacts of being on steroids can be a weakened bone density. Like we're talking over many years, so osteoporosis. And of course, one of the ways of increasing bone density is through lifting weights. So this gave me a really big impetus to get back into lifting weights. So I decided to do it a little bit more seriously. I'll grandly call it a home gym, but really it's just a bench, a rack, and some weights in our boiler room downstairs. And started doing it, started eating more, put on more weight, and wasn't really thinking about my nutrition. I needed to eat more protein. I definitely put on muscle, and then probably about a year later, I looked in the mirror and I realized, oh, I've also got quite fat.
I think we've all been through that experience.
Yeah.
Anyone who gets into weights thinks, I need to eat more, I need to eat protein. And then within 6 months, you're like, I've definitely been eating too much.
Yes, exactly. That is exactly what happened. By this point, I was 75 kilos, so put on 20 kilo, which was definitely a much better position health-wise than I was before. But my body composition was definitely suboptimal. And had I continued eating like that, I would now be considerably larger. So then I started taking my nutrition seriously as well. I began tracking my calories. Honestly, that was a game changer. I mean, I think you've talked about this on the podcast before. You learn so much just in tracking your calories. The amount of calories in a handful of nuts is just insane, and you don't realize this. I remember when I was cycling to work in London, and I would have a bag of peanuts when I got to work, and I was like, I don't know why I'm not losing weight like with all this cycling. It's 'cause I'm being 4,000 calories in nuts or something.
People think, oh, it's healthy, therefore
Yeah,
it's good for me. But if
yeah,
you've got fat loss goals, it can be counterproductive to eat loads of high fat foods, even if they are healthy.
yeah, absolutely. And nuts in moderation are healthy fats and all of that. It says on the front of the packet, Toby, high in fiber. Um,
High in protein, I
High
think
in
it probably
protein.
says, which is a
Yeah.
stretch.
Yeah, it is a bit of a stretch. Everything's high in protein these days. Yeah, so then I started tracking my calories, and actually, I have been tracking my calories and weighing my food for the last 3 years, with a few breaks. I find it really empowering personally, and obviously, I don't take scales to a restaurant. I don't take scales to my friend's house. I went out for dinner, ran to my friend's house for dinner at the weekend. I didn't track calories in the evening, but on a day-to-day basis, I mostly track calories because I like to know roughly how much protein I've had. And it also nudges me to make slightly better decisions about the food that I'm going to eat, which I think over the course of months does make a difference. I don't stick to it religiously, particularly at the moment when I'm kind of going through a bulking phase. When I'm dieting and cutting, I tend to be a bit more strict about it. I've had people say to me, "Oh, that doesn't seem like a healthy relationship with food," but I find it really empowering. It means I can eat cake. Like, I know I can eat that cake because I've got this many calories and I cannot offset it later on. And it's definitely delivered results for me. So I got my nutrition in check, and then I generally work out, or try to work out, 3 times a week, lifting weights. Over the past 5 years, that's varied in intensity about how often I do that. Sometimes when I've been poorly, it's been 1 time a week, sometimes none. Sometimes I do it for an hour, sometimes I do it for less. You've got to lean into where you are in your life, I suppose.
I see the tracking side of things as a tool. I am sometimes lax about it or don't track at all. Like at the moment, I'm not tracking at all. But
Mm.
when I am serious about having a physique related goal that I want to achieve, that's when it's a really helpful tool for me. I do understand the argument that is that is that a healthy relationship with food, but the educational component and understanding what's in your diet and what's in your food, I think is really powerful. And I think having done it so long now, I don't have to weigh things. I can confidently eyeball something and say that's 200-gram chicken breast or that's 30 grams of protein. I like to play a little game with myself of if I see a picture of a meal or someone's cooked, like trying to guess how many grams of protein, how many
Yeah.
calories are in it, just to test my knowledge. With your training, what does that look like? So you're training at home, barbell, bench, squat rack? Do you have dumbbells as well, or just a barbell? What's the training split look like?
I have a squat rack and a mini Olympic bar, and I think 150 kilo and bumper plates that go onto it. I have a few dumbbells as well. I tend to divide my training around the big three of squats, bench, and deadlifts, and variations on those. The book Bigger, Stronger, Leaner by Michael Matthews was really influential in my early weightlifting journey. Tutoring and mentoring from one of my very good friends, particularly over the lockdown COVID period, who he'd been into it for a long time, and we were throughout lockdown we were texting every day, and was really big into training, and that really helped me to have someone to talk me through all of that. It turns out it's quite useful having a coach. At the moment, I've just gone through a period where my time has been a bit more limited. We've had builders because we've been having building work happening in the house, and where they were was exactly eye level through a window where I was working out. And that made me feel extremely self-conscious working out when they were here. And they're here at like 8 in the morning until the end of the day. So I was generally getting up and doing half-hour sessions before they arrived because that's what I could manage. And then I didn't have to subject them to me intensely staring at them whilst I squatted. I wanted to see what if I did a really quick workout, and I think I was doing one of your quick workouts, which is kind of full body workout where you do circuits. I had a few variations on that, and I was surprised. Who knew? You do the same thing again and again, like just slightly increasing the reps. You do actually put on muscle and get better at it. And it kind of got to the point where I was like, I'm actually doing way too many reps now from this. But then also there came a point after a couple of months when I lifted my arms like, wow, it's like I'm like a bat. I've got those. I don't know what those muscles are at the back.
Down the side?
I'm now moving into a position where I'm enjoying having a little bit more time, and I'm designing a program where I can spend an hour, hopefully three 1 hour sessions, or maybe 2 hour 1 hour sessions and one half hour session. I also use kettlebells quite a bit, which I've enjoyed. And at times when I've been a little bit more obsessed with my training, we've gone on holiday in the UK, I've taken a couple of kettlebells in the car, much to the hilarity of my daughter and wife. Like, why have you got like 36 kilo of kettlebells at the bottom of the car? But and then I can work out in the garden of whatever home rental we've got.
Yeah. If it's any consolation, I have also done exactly that on holiday in the UK. Does all of that help with the symptoms from the Addisons?
Well, in terms of the long term, my original long term goal, which was to increase bone density, it has helped with that. And I know this because I've had DEXA scans of my bone density. I had them when I was first diagnosed, and then I had them 3 years later. My bone density had measurably increased, which is significant because generally, as you get older, your bone density decreases, regardless of whether or not you have Addison's. But also, when you're on steroids, that's a double whammy, so you're more likely to lose bone density. So that was a really important marker for me and showed that it was worthwhile. I wouldn't say that it necessarily helps me directly manage any other aspect of the Addisons, but it has been so important for my mental health throughout that period. Particularly, I mean, this isn't related to Addisons, but particularly during the lockdown, doing those workouts was really key to keeping me motivated and my mental health. And I've got to the point now where I just really enjoy it, and I get a little bit grumpy if I don't get to do my workout. And I think that is the key to having a successful sort of health and fitness regime. Is like not just having those long-term aims like increasing bone density or putting muscle on, but also doing something that you enjoy on a daily basis. Because if you're not enjoying it, then you're less motivated to do it.
Yeah. So you've mentioned muscle gain and fat loss, so physique related goals.
Mm.
The long-term benefits and the reason, or part of the reason you prioritized it was around bone density and dealing with that. What else is important to you, like health-wise? Like, what are your goals? I mean, you've touched on it a little bit there with your mental health, but is there
Mm.
anything else?
Um, so feeling healthy and confident in my body, I think, is the first one. And training regularly and keeping on top of my nutrition helps with those things. Eating healthily is really important. So it's not just about tracking the calories, it's also about making sure that I'm having, wherever I can, home cooked meals, not eating ultra processed foods.
We're
Exactly.
gonna have to go with whatever you think it is.
But that's a fantastic book and has definitely changed the decisions I make about stuff that I'm eating. Yeah, regular exercise, but then also mental health. And I think it's worth just dwelling on that final one. It is linked to the physical health, and I feel better when I work out. But it's all. But then I also feel physically worse and feel more down about my Addison's as well, and I'm managing a chronic condition where my mental health hasn't been so good. And there have been times at work where it's been really stressful, and I think I've probably been on a mental health journey which has also affected my physical health. I've also over the last 10 years kind of had irritable bowel syndrome, which is triggered by stress. And about 10 years ago, my doctor said to me when I was going through all this process, said, you need to be better at managing stress. And then I've also been on a mental health journey as well, which is impacted. That began with mindfulness and doing meditations. I know that you're a big proponent of this and meditate every day. I meditate every day, although sometimes I do it a little bit more seriously than other times. That's been really helpful. But I think another thing that's been really helpful is this phrase that you've used a lot, meta-cognition, which, let's just unpack that. My understanding of that is noticing the patterns in your thought and how they're affecting you. Is that how you intend to use it?
I see it as an awareness of your thoughts, feelings, and emotions as the person listening to them, not the narrator of them. So you're not necessarily identifying as the person's in your head, whether you have an internal monologue or not, that is saying, I feel like this or I'm thinking this. You are the person listening to them. And that means you can detach yourself from identifying as the emotion or the thought or the feeling, because we are not those things. We
Yeah,
are our response to them. That's how I see it.
yeah. That is a very elegant way of putting it. I'm better than I could have done it. Thank you. So an example of that is I was going through a period of work which was incredibly busy and stressful. And it wasn't just one thing. It wasn't like this massive all-consuming project. It was the volumes, the sheer volumes of everything. And I was struggling a little bit of that. And there was a point in my life where you get the stress reaction, you have fight or flight. And earlier in my career, I always felt trapped and I wanted to escape. But then at some point, that tipped over into fight. I began to get angry when I was stressed. And it wasn't just like one thing, it'd be like another email and another email, which in isolation seemed very reasonable, but taken as a whole, it was just unmanageable. And I was beginning to get get angry, and I got into this pattern of getting really angry. And there's kind of a self-righteousness to this anger. Sometimes like, don't they know how busy I am? And that's sort of a little bit seductive in a way. You feel like, don't they know how busy I am? And that makes you feel important. And then you get into this loop. I was impatient at home. One of the things of dealing with the Addisons is that when sometimes I might be underdosed for my steroids. It's difficult to manage it, and that can make me more impatient and worse at dealing with my minor illnesses. So this was kind of impacting it, and I was in a bit of a loop. And then I heard the psychologist Julie Smith on a podcast talking about how to you recognize the triggers of stress and so on. And that embarked me on a journey about kind of learning about sort of metacognition. And I was much better at noticing the triggers for me getting angry and stepping back and not being the subject of that narrative, but seeing those emotions. And I think that and I read part of her book. I didn't even read the whole book, but I read part of her book. Why did no one tell me this before? Which is really good.
Yeah, I've got that.
Yeah. And that really helped me to recognize when I was getting into that loop and step back. And that also allowed me to deal better with my physical health as well, because I wasn't getting into that loop, which was triggering my physical health. So I'll pause there on mental health. I think it is an important part of the whole, and taking a holistic view of your health and fitness, working out, nutrition, and mental health as well.
For sure. Mind and matter.
Indeed.
Man, that's really interesting what you just said. So, firstly, I don't meditate every day. At the moment, I don't meditate at all. I go through periods, a bit like you with your passions and hobbies, of getting really into it and doing it consistently and nailing it as much as someone can nail something where there is no intended goal or outcome. And then periods where I just feel like I've got too much on. So, at the moment, I'm rehabbing an injury, like I spoke about in last
Yeah.
week's podcast. I've just got a lot of other things on my plate, so it's not something that I'm doing at the moment. And I wish I was, like, it is one of the things that I do get value from when I'm doing it around metacognition and the same sorts of things that you were just talking about. But just realistically for me, sometimes it's just not something that I'm able to commit to. So I wanted to say that so people don't think I am meditating every day. And the other thing that I was just reflecting on is when you're struggling with stress and then a medical professional tells you you need to be better at managing stress. Yeah, without getting to the root cause, you're always, to some extent, putting a sticking plaster on a gaping wound, and the source of the stress, your work, is sometimes impossible to actually get away from because you need to work. And I have definitely, when you were talking about the volume there, it actually really brought back, I think it was about December 2020. So lockdown, all of that, just being bombarded with Teams messages before an important meeting. Who was the cybersecurity program board? People asking me for stuff and demanding stuff. I just couldn't cope. I messaged my manager and said, I'm going to have to take some time off because I just can't
Yeah.
deal with this. And just when you were talking about the volume, and it just really brought it back to me, like how overwhelming that can be when there's just
Yeah.
information and data and demands coming at you from so many different angles. Things are much better now. And I do think that you can do all the prioritization of working on your resilience and everything else in the world. It will make the small stuff easier to deal with for sure, and it will equip you with tools and things that you can use when bad stuff happens so you can manage it better. But sometimes things just do get too much and you respond
Yeah.
by either fighting or flighting.
Yeah. Yeah. It's absolutely true. I agree. And I think that's why you have to have obviously strategies in place for how you manage yourself and how you recognize how you react to things so that you are prepared when those events happen. Of course, a little bit of stress is not a bad thing. If you're constantly in this position, you need to be able to take a look at your life and say, what are the things that I can change, which isn't about how I react to things, but what are the actual things in my life that I can do, that I can craft, which will reduce that stress or change it or make it more manageable,
Yeah.
rather than just being buffeted by the winds all the time.
Yeah, I think there's a bit about controlling the controllable and where you have autonomy and doing what you can in that context. And one thing that's really helped me and was something that I worked on more last year was getting in tune with my emotional state and becoming more aware of what I was feeling and allowing myself to process those feelings rather than just going, I'm experiencing this negative emotion. I shouldn't be experiencing that. Therefore, either like self-criticism or I will ignore it or just force myself to change my emotional state, which, as I've learned, is not actually possible. Um, so you've got a lot on your plate. I think we've established that. How do you manage all of that? Find time for what matters? How are you managing finding time for writing when you're also caring for your wife, your child, your own health? What's your approach to that?
It's something that I think about a lot and something that I have written about. And actually, being on this career break is the perfect time to answer that, because I've had the time to reflect on it. And also, my time right now is very different to most of the rest of my life in terms of 9 to 5 or 8 to 7 job as it's been. So I can draw that contrast. At the moment, in theory, I am master of my own time between 9 and 5. I could drop my daughter off in the morning, pick her up from after school club in the evening. So you would think that I am doing absolutely everything, like working out 4 times a week, walking the dog, doing all my hobbies, writing a novel, and absolutely smashing it. But the truth is, I don't have time to do all the things that I want to do. I don't even have time to do all the things that I consider a bare minimum. You might argue I've swapped one type of work for another type of work, in that I am writing a novel. And by the way, this news just in, writing a novel takes quite a lot of time. It's a lot of writing. This was genuinely a surprise to me. I kind of imagined going into this career break, I would have time to read novels, pursue my hobbies, also write the novel, and so on. And then when I first began on this endeavor, and I was spending all my time writing and then walking the dog, and then I also want to bake a sourdough loaf, and I also want to do this and do that, and I wasn't achieving them. I was giving myself a hard time, because I realized I was holding myself to an impossible standard, because I am in many ways living the dream in this period where I'm master of my own destiny, 9 to 5. Why wouldn't I do everything as perfectly as I possibly could and achieve everything that I want to do? Well, because actually 9 to 5 is only 8 hours, and what I want to do takes 24 hours, and there's a finite amount of time in our life before we die. That's why. So how do I manage all of this? I suppose there's two elements that I have developed, both reflecting on my previous career and also this period of career break. First of all, mindset, and second of all, practical application. Mindset, first of all, the idea that you can achieve everything is obviously ridiculous. You and I are both big fans of the work of Oliver Berkman, of course, and if you could sum up his work in one sentence, it would be, you have to choose, you can't do everything. And that is a really important mindset to get into. So I've been trying to actively choose what I'm going to do fewer things, and recognize there'll be a portion of my day where I do what I want to do. I get 3 or 4 good hours of work on the novel in the morning, and then the rest of the time I'm going to be doing other things that I need to be doing: parenting, walking the dog, running the house, going on podcasts. It might be that I get to do something else that I want to do, or it might not, and that's also fine. That's part of the mindset. I think Oliver Berkman has this image of going down a river, and we all will imagine that we're in the super yacht. That's where I imagined I was. I was in the super yacht going down the river on my career break. I could do what I want. I could steer wherever I wanted to go. But in actual fact, we're in a canoe being buffeted by the waves, and that is a adjustment of mindset. And I know that you've talked about that as well. Shall I pause on mindset before moving on to practical applications? Because I can
Yeah,
see you're
okay.
making notes
So
there.
I left my NHS job on the 31st of January last year, so
Hmm.
nearly my 1 year anniversary. And I can remember this time last year, I was thinking, I'm going to have all this time. I'm going to learn how to play chess properly. I'm going to get back into playing the piano, and then I'm going to smash it at work. And then I just filled the time that I used to spend working with new work. And then when you've got all your responsibilities on top of that, the time just disappeared. And I still haven't got back into piano. I played chess with my 8-year-old son, Bailey, a few times, but I don't think he's going to help me become a grandmaster anytime soon. And I've still got this list of things that I want to do and have not got around to doing anything about. Maybe I never will, because there will always be something and there will always be ways to fill your time. I'm interested to know, do you ever like wake up in the morning and just think, I can do like nothing today? If I want to, I can just lie around watching Netflix. Are you ever tempted to do that?
That is a really good question. No. If I am having a day off, a day where I'm not doing writing or something, it's something that I will have scheduled in advance. in a way, I kind of wish that I did sometimes wake up and be like, I'm just not going to do anything. I'm just going to sit in my pants and play video games or watch Netflix or whatever. But I have a routine, and that routine has been really important in getting me to do stuff. And I find it very difficult to break that routine. It would make me feel slightly uncomfortable. I wish I could do it more, because actually I think that that would be more interesting if I did do it a bit more regularly. The writer Annie Dillard wrote, "A routine is a net for catching your days." And that has definitely been true for me. So after dropping off my daughter, I come back, make myself a coffee, I write in my journal, and we should talk about journaling actually, because you mentioned it, and I know that you've had a few questions about how people do it. And then I write, and then until about half 12, 1, then I have lunch, and then the rest of my day flows from there. There have been occasional days where I've scheduled, like today, I'm going to not do writing, but then in my mind, I'm like, well, here's all the other things, the things that I want to do, that I want to fulfill my time with. And actually, that's another bit of learning from this year. Because I was scheduling all of my time with things that I absolutely wanted to do, I didn't schedule any rest, any downtime, any like unstructured free time where I was just like watching Netflix or whatever. And I think that's quite different to when you, quite often when you're working and you've had a really long day, you're just really tired. You're like, oh, I'm just going to sit down in front of the telly or do whatever it is, and you don't think quite so much about it. And not having that unstructured free time caused me to be stressed.
Mm.
Because I was always doing something. I was always in the need to be productive. And you've talked in the past about toxic productivity, and it is easy to kind of trend into that if you are scheduling your time all of the time. So I do try, and mainly in the evenings, I do try and have unstructured rest time where I could just do whatever I want to do.
Yeah. I occasionally have the thought, I've never acted on it, but I do occasionally think, well, nothing bad will happen if I just do nothing today. But like you, there's like hinge points in my day, like school run at the start and end of the day,
Mhm.
lunch, and that structure, that routine is what pins down what I do through the day. So doing fewer things absolutely has helped me as well, and just prioritizing what's most important and having that mindset that if I get more time to do this other stuff, bonus. If I don't, it's okay. I don't have to do everything every single day. Journaling is a good example of that. So I'll do it 4 or 5 times a week when I've got time, but when I don't like go, fuck's sake, I've not done my 30 minutes journaling today. The point is to help you process your thoughts and feelings, and then getting stressed out about it is ridiculous, really. What do you write when you're journaling as a precursor to your novel writing?
Well, I have two notebooks that I write in. I have one which is like a traditional diary, which I've always kept a diary, not that I write in it every day, but whenever I feel like writing about what's going on in my life, I write in the diary. And then I have a logbook, which I write about the process of developing my novel and the things that I'm thinking about in terms of culture, literature, and so on. I'm not very good at keeping the two separate. Sometimes one trends into the other. The other day, I was reading back my logbook, and the recurring theme of my logbook is always me beating myself up about the time that I start writing, or like something has disrupted my day, and I need to make sure that I'm writing at 9 o'clock. Like it's not 9:30, it's now 10 o'clock, and it actually became quite boring reading that back, and it made me realize actually this is an important lesson. It's actually been fine. I've written an awful lot. It's the whole imperfect consistency thing, turning up and doing the work every day. It doesn't need to be at exactly the same time. So generally, I try and just write about things that have happened, funny conversations I've had, things that are on my mind, things that are bothering me. The writer Kathy Rensenbrink says that you can just use your journal to write whatever nasty things you think about other people, because no one else needs to read it. Just get it out. It doesn't matter. So you can write all the uncharitable thoughts that you have in there about other people and your minor petty resentments, or not. You can also write about the things that have made you happy, and that is something that I am trying to do a little bit more. One might think, hearing me talk about, oh, I can't possibly, I'm on this career break and I can't fit everything in. It's really stressful. It really is very stressful. You might think that I sound ungrateful. It's very easy to, I think, normalize the position that you're in, when in fact, at the moment, I am living my best life. I've been trying recently to savor some of the aspects of that. And you do that by writing about the good things, the conversations that I had with my daughter in the car, dropping her off at school, which I wouldn't have had if I were at work the funny experiences that I've had walking the dog, the beautiful skies on the moor, that kind of thing. It doesn't have to be too woo-woo. It's just like what made you happy on that day. And I think that by reflecting on them more and leaning into them a little bit more and just writing a few lines on them, you just appreciate them a little bit more.
Yeah, I think you capture that very well in your newsletter.
Thank you.
And I also think that because I imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, that, and I say this as someone who's also has a newsletter, so is aware of this, you're probably on the lookout for things, ideas, stories, experiences that you might want to write about. And therefore, because you're on the lookout for them, it makes you more aware of those beautiful moments, those nice moments, and that makes you, because you're more aware, you therefore notice them and therefore appreciate them more. You've muted yourself somehow.
Yes, I think that's true. It is a self-sustaining kind of narrative. As you write about things and look out for things, you're more likely to notice them. I think there's that newsletter, The Art of Noticing, which was also a book which talks a little bit about that. Journaling really important and kind of gives me the energy to go on and do writing. It's also a good way to start your day as well, because you can get all the rubbish off your mind. Which leads us into talking about energy. I know that you were keen to talk about managing energy.
Yeah, we haven't come back to the practical application
Oh,
of
of
how you're
course.
managing your time, but talk about energy and we'll come back to that.
We can do it whatever order you want. But
Just go.
okay, managing energy. I've heard you use in the podcast in the past the phrase nourishing your energy, I think, which is a phrase I really like. And I think that looks different at different times, and you need to recognize that. You've also talked about, is this a week to speed up, slow down, maintain? I think it is.
Yeah.
For me, it's recognizing where your energy levels are on a day-to-day basis. It's also recognizing where you are in life and what the challenges are in your life at a certain time. Although you said to me, are there any times when you wake up and you just want to sit down and watch Netflix? No, that hasn't happened. But there are times when I've woken up, and one of the features of my Addison's disease is that I can get fatigue. And there have been days where I've got up, I've dropped my daughter off at school, and I've just gone back to bed because I've just been so exhausted, which is really annoying, but just something that you have to deal with. And recognizing that that's the case rather than pushing through is an important part of that sort of meta-cognition narrative that we talked about. Scheduling those unstructured rest times is also an important part of kind of nourishing that energy, and just adapting to where I am and what's going on. So there have been times with the Addisons where I have been dealing with really low energy levels and fatigue, and I know I've got to work less. That is actually a mental game as anything else, and accepting that you're going to achieve less and just setting yourself smaller goals. One of the things that I've been thinking about recently is the goal setting approach, which is where you set 3 goals. So your minimum, your target, and your challenging goal. So just writing a few hundred words might be your minimum, or 100 words. Your target might be writing 700 words, and a really challenging stretching goal might be writing 2,000 words. And that way, it's very easy to achieve your goals, but you've got a high degree of latitude, and that allows you to feel that you're achieving goals but fit to the energy profile that you have on any given day. Because if you have low energy and you're still pushing yourself and you're not achieving the things you want to do, you're just going to feel crap, you know. And I've been there. And even though you have done some things, you can feel like a failure. The thing that can help with that is keeping a done list rather than a to-do list. I'm a really big fan of this. It's amazing what difference that small change makes in terms of psychologically. Like, oh yeah, I've done all these things today, rather than I haven't done all these things today. That's had a really important impact on me. And then just thinking at a kind of a macro level in terms of managing energy, about seasons in life, there have been times with one of the features of the Addisons is it can take me longer to fight off minor illnesses, and that can really I've had long periods of time off work. I've had several weeks off work and a bunch of times, and that can be quite dispiriting. But recognizing during that period my goal is to get better, and resting and managing my energy appropriately is part of achieving that goal, has helped to kind of frame that and make it better.
Yeah. So the rest is part of the effort almost. I think
Yes,
that same thing is true in training and going after health related goals as well.
absolutely.
I really like what you said about the two components of how you set goals or ambitions being where your personal energy is at, physically and mentally, but also like logistics, what you've got going on in your life. Because
Yeah.
you could have a pretty clear schedule that means I'm going to go to the gym 4 days a week. I'm going to meal prep. But if you're feeling fatigued and low energy, then those two things just don't align. So you're setting yourself up to feel like a failure when you don't do those things because you just don't have the usual level of motivation or energy that you might otherwise have. What about the practical application of managing your time and fitting everything in?
So historically, I have not always been very good at this. I spoke earlier about how I used to salami slice my time, do a little bit of everything, feel ultimately unfulfilled and achieve nothing. Only the other day, my wife said to me, "You don't understand time. You've never understood time. You just don't get it." Which is her referencing the fact that I am always massively over optimistic about what I can possibly achieve.
There's a name for that, is there?
Hmm, optimism bias, I think. Yes. Something which, of course, as a former program manager, you are very familiar with.
Funnily enough, that is one thing that I've been able to take from my previous professional life and apply in my new life.
Well, I'm sure it's one of the many things that you've taken,
Yeah.
but yeah, and I think and actually, I do think about that. Our discussions about program management and our optimism bias a lot when I'm thinking about how I structure my time. Only last week, I felt like I had a mental breakthrough on this. I had a moment of clarity. I was reading or I've been listening to the audiobook of How Big Things Get Done. And I can't remember exactly who wrote that book, but it's about how big projects get done, kind of infrastructure projects, but also home renovations, all of that kind of thing. One of the things that the authors say in that book is that people tend to plan their time around best case scenario. Like, this is what I will do, and if nothing interrupts me, and this is what I'll achieve. But of course, things do interrupt. You're having building work done on your house. The builders need your input. Whatever it is that interrupts your day. And I realized that I always made my planning assumptions on best case scenario planning. Integrating optimism bias into my planning has been an important part of it. So practical applications, doing fewer things and making active choices. I've started to plan my weeks ahead roughly about the kind of things that I want to achieve on a week, recognizing what the structure of the day might look like. So I'm going to have 3 or 4 good hours of work in a morning on writing, and recognizing that if I don't have that time, then I'm unlikely to do that in the afternoon, and just accepting that I'm going to be doing other things in the afternoon because I have other demands on my time. And then kind of looking over a month as well. So what are the things I want to achieve in the next couple of months, and making sure that I'm fitting them all in. Because of course, if you're writing a novel and you don't do any writing one day, like you said with your business, if you don't do something for one day, it doesn't matter. But if you don't do anything every day, it does matter. So where is that balance? And then some of the other things I've talked about, writing a done list and making sure that I am scheduling in time to rest as well. Those are probably the most practical things. And this is part of the mindset, adapting as well, like kind of as you go through a day or through a week, recognizing how your day has been thrown off from how you imagined it, and adapting your schedule appropriately. And this is also something I've been very bad at previously. I talked earlier about stress and anger and impatience as a result of the stress. And I've come to recognize that impatience is essentially where the mismatch of expectations with reality. I have an idea in my mind quite often about how a day is going to go. And if it doesn't go that way, I get really impatient. I get really, really angry. And I know that I'm not naturally good at flexing how I will manage my day. So recognizing that I can adapt and thinking, oh, okay, actually, I thought I had 2 hours for this. I've now only got 45 minutes. Is this a good use of my time in this 45 minutes? Or is there something else I could do in this time, which is a good use of my time? And then when will I do it instead? And that comes back to the planning point. And then when I go back to the planning, making sure that I am putting the big rocks in the jar first. The analogy, of course, being, which I know, but for the benefit of anyone who doesn't, if you're filling up a jar with full of gravel, small rocks, big rocks, you want to put the big rocks in first, and you can fit the gravel around it. So, what are the important priorities in your life? All of that sounds like I am some kind of productivity mindset guru and that I manage to balance all of this extremely well. I don't. Of course, I don't. I still get frustrated. I still completely fail to appropriately manage my time. I still try and fit in 2 hours of work in 45 minutes and then get annoyed when I can't. But I would say that over this period of career break where I've been learning to structure all of this time, I have got better at it and got better at accepting when things don't work and when to flex. But that has been something that I've built up over time, and
Yeah.
it isn't something that you can just suddenly arrive at.
And the adaptability, and I would also say learning from experience. So when things don't go as you want them to, and for scheduling 3 hours of writing, see getting 3 workouts in a week, or
Mm.
maintaining your healthy diet, or any other goal, how can you reflect on that and learn from it to preempt the inevitability that something similar is going to happen in future? And that is, for me, one of the big benefits of reviewing how my week has gone and planning. You mentioned doing like a weekly plan or something like that, but I think the other component of that is just reflecting on what's gone well this week, what hasn't gone well, and where things
Mm-hmm.
haven't gone according to plan. Why? What can I do about them in future? Now,
Yeah.
I will also say that if I went back through my old journals, I'll find the same traps that I'm falling into, that I'm complaining about checking inboxes too frequently, or like going through the cycles of doing the same things. But I think that has helped me to try and learn from the challenges that I face in my life so that I can improve on them over time.
Yeah, I completely agree. You've got to have that period for reflection and adaptation, and you need to involve other people in it as well, because that's the other thing that you can't account for is other people. Um, in my currently rather limited life of being on career break and being at home in a domestic sphere, what that looks like for me is me and my wife have recently instituted a weekly week ahead review meeting where we have an agenda. We talk about the things that are coming up in the diary, what that means. We save space for venting. What do we do well from the week before? Which makes us sound like massive nerds, I know, but genuinely has revolutionized the domestic space. But I think that's also what one does in a professional setting as well, and where I've had more productive teams at work, it's been where we made the space to do that as well.
Yeah. The other thing I was just thinking about was the expectation versus reality definition of impatience. And nowhere is that more true than if you're asking your child to get ready so you can leave the house, and your expectation is that's going to happen in 2 minutes. But children are on their own timeline. And if it takes them 10 minutes, it's your responsibility to have asked them 10 minutes earlier, not complain that they're not taking the amount of time that you expect them to take.
Yep, so true.
What advice would you give to someone who's serious about their health and fitness goals? They know the value, they know it's important, but they struggle with organizing, prioritizing, and consistency.
I think I would say a few things, and it's about mindset and it's about practicality. I think the first thing to say is you don't need to do everything all at once, and indeed, you shouldn't do everything all at once. In this conversation, we've talked about getting your mental health in the right place. We've talked about fitting in 3 workouts a week. We've talked about being productive in all the time that you've had. We've talked about being in the right mindset. Don't try and suddenly implement all of those things in your life all at once. because it's not going to work. These are learnings which you and I have arrived at over many years of practice. And actually, probably the health journey that I talked about and the fitness journey in terms of my lifting weights is indicative of this. First started lifting weights, then started thinking about nutrition, then started thinking about how to kind of optimization. You kind of got to build it up and layer it up.
Mm-hmm.
And health and fitness isn't a binary thing. It's easy to fall into that trap, and it's definitely a trap I've fallen into in the past. It's like, oh, I've not done my workout this week, therefore I am not being healthy, therefore I can eat whatever I want, or I'm just not being healthy. You can make small decisions every day which will incrementally improve your health and fitness, be they food decisions, taking the stairs, just doing a half-hour workout if you can fit it in. It's not like you have to do everything all at once. You're healthy or not. And I think that's the mindset. On people who are struggling to prioritize their health and fitness, there is something about taking a step back and asking yourself, what is it that's stopping you achieving these things? Is it you're not enjoying doing the workouts? Is it you're just not something that's not motivating you about it? And just kind of doing that bit of critical self-analysis, which could be through just journaling, it could be talking to someone about it, and kind of arriving at an understanding, and then seeing whether or not you can move any of those barriers, I suppose. I've certainly had that with the things that I've been struggling with in my life. Paying attention to what gives you energy and what doesn't. If something isn't energizing you, there's probably a reason for that, and maybe you need to change something about it, do something different. On a practical note about how to fit everything in, I have very boring advice of I'm a big fan of lists, making a list of all the things that you want to do. I absolutely loved the classic Toby approach to your pre-Christmas. I'm going to rate all of the days before Christmas about my diet. A red, amber, or green. Today is a red day, so I'm going to be eating crap. That may be a level of program management geekery too far for some people, but I think there is a lot of merit in it. What's the time that you have available? Thinking about myself and what I've said about I'm not very good at adapting to how circumstances change. I get into a bit of a rut. Actually writing down what your day looks like and what you're filling your time with, it does then prompt you to question like, oh, do I need to be spending my time doing that? Or could I be spending it in a different way? And having that critical self-analysis. Finally, the thing that I've talked about, which was the goal setting and the minimum, the target, and then the challenging goal. Try setting some goals like that as well. You can achieve your goals with really small things, and it might spur you on to do more. One of those approaches, or all of them, will probably help people who are struggling to fit it all in. But don't try and do everything at once. You don't have to.
Yeah. I think the last one you mentioned there around minimum baseline stretch goal or ambitious goal is really helpful for people who struggle with self-criticism, struggle with all or nothing mindset, which you talked about as well, because you can set a minimum goal of, and it's going to be contextual, but 1 or 2 workouts, get enough protein every day, or maybe it's like being mindful of calories, and then building up from there to feel like every week can be a success, rather than I didn't achieve this unrealistic standard, therefore I have failed. Therefore, I'm being bad, so I'm just going to eat cheesecake and not do anything whatsoever. I definitely fall into that all or nothing trap still, like around Christmas. Oh, well, might as well just eat everything, despite all the red, amber, green. Every day becomes red. No, I'm not that bad.
Health and fitness is a long-term project. It's not something that you do overnight. It's something you need to work at, and there are different elements. As in probably many people's professional lives, you wouldn't suddenly try and achieve a project all in one day and implement everything. You've got to stage things. Putting a bit of thought into how you stage things can really help with that.
Yeah, for sure. It's been really good to talk through. We've covered way more than I even expected we would, which is really, really good. Where can people find out more about your work? How can people follow what you're doing?
I write on Substack. You can find me at elsewhereunderwritten.substack.com, which is a really difficult phrase to make people remember, but elsewhereunderwritten.substack.com. It comes from a Philip Larkin poem where he talks about being abroad, and here no elsewhere underwrites my existence. So elsewhereunderwritten.substack.com. I have a newsletter where I talk about my career break currently, compare it to my previous career break, productivity, writing, and the general process of writing a novel.
I will put the link in the show notes as well, so people don't necessarily need to remember it.
Thank you. I am going to keep on writing it. Writing is really important for me. It is how I organize my thoughts, get my ideas out into the world. And yeah, I'm absolutely going to keep on writing it. Thank
Good.
you.
Thank you for coming on. We
Thank you
might
for
have
having
to
me.
do a separate one all about productivity, because I think that we barely scratched the surface on
Yeah.
that. So thank you, and we'll see you soon.
All right. Thanks for having me.
And scene.